New Star Wars movie release dates won't be yearly, they'll be events. How you guys doing? Happy May 4th. I hope you're all having a great day today, especially on Star Wars Day. We're going to do some streams later in the evening, some gaming streams and some unboxings and stuff like that. But I want to get to this news video real quick here because there's some information in there regarding Star Wars movies. Last month, Lucasfilm revealed the future of a galaxy far, far away at the Star Wars Celebration in London. Now, President and Executive Producer Kathleen Kennedy has discussed Lucasfilm's current release strategy for their film slate. In an interview with Empire magazine, Kathleen Kennedy confirmed plans to eventize each Star Wars. So what does that mean? Well, yearly releases are no longer a thing, and Kathleen Kennedy credited the James Bond franchise as an inspiration behind this model. Why? Well, the plan will hopefully take off pressure from the studio and ensure the quality of the upcoming movies. I've often brought up Bond, Kennedy said. That's every 3 or 4 years, and there wasn't this pressure to feel like you had to have a movie every year. I feel that was very important to Star Wars. We have to eventize this. It's much better to tell the truth that we're going to make these movies when they're ready to be made, and release them when they're ready to be released. I've often brought up Bond. That's every 3 or 4 years, and there wasn't this pressure to feel like you had to have a movie every year. So, literally, George Lucas. Why do you have to bring up James Bond? Why can't you just be like, well, why don't we go back to what George Lucas used to do, who created Star Wars, and release movies every 3 or so years? 1977, A New Hope. 1980, The Empire Strikes Back. 1983, Return of the Jedi. 1999, The Phantom Menace. 2002, Attack of the Clones, and Revenge of the Sith in 2005. That's one movie every 3 years, which is exactly what she's talking about. I don't understand. It's like she just completely forgets that George exists and doesn't even want to mention anything to do. Like, I really don't understand, bro. Like, how can this person be running Lucasfilm, man? I've often brought up Bond. That's every 3 or 4 years. And yes, I'm nitpicking. But it's just such an insult at this point. I think their whole model is off. You don't need to be making Star Wars movies every 3 years for them to be good. You just need to make good Star Wars movies. You just need to make good Star Wars products. It's that simple. I don't think Star Wars fatigue exists or will ever exist. I think the issue is we have a Star Wars famine where people aren't getting enough Star Wars, and so they're becoming disassociated with it. And the Star Wars that we do get really isn't the Star Wars that we are used to and were brought up with. And that's because of Kathleen Kennedy's inability to really comprehend what Star Wars is and what it used to be under George. Case in point, she's bringing up Bond. Like, I love the James Bond movies just as much as anyone else. I grew up with them just like Star Wars. George was the one who created Star Wars, and he also had movies every 3 years or more. So I really fail to understand where her logic is. Now, I don't think necessarily the issue is releasing movies too soon, close to each other. I think the issue more so is creating a good product. So if we had, let's say, 5 great movies, they could release those all, every year. Look at Marvel, for example. They had a great run with Thanos. And that's because they were building up a really great story with the Russo bros and Kevin Feige. They were working really well together. And I think the issue here isn't necessarily the time slot of releasing these movies, but rather creating a good team that works synergistically, and a team who has done their Star Wars homework and understands Star Wars. And instead of focusing on agendas and things like that, they can focus on the story and writing the story and continuing the story of George Lucas instead of making some of their new stuff, which really has just taken the spotlight away from the original characters that we grew up with, that George created, and putting it on the new ones that they have by putting down the old guys. Boba Fett to Mandalorian, Obi-Wan with Reva and all that crap in there, Luke to Rey, and so on and so forth. I think there's a lot that can be done with Star Wars, and I just don't think it's being handled appropriately by Kathleen Kennedy. There are some good Star Wars projects that were created under Disney's timeline, of course, like Rogue One was great, The Mandalorian, but I think a lot of those perhaps had to do with the team that was assembled and Kathleen keeping her nose as much as she can out of things, right? Like Rogue One, for example, had George on set quite a few times. The Mandalorian, George was on set quite a few times, and it was, Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau who are very respectful of George and listen to a lot of what he has to say. So I think Personally, the issue isn't releasing Star Wars movies every year. I think they would make bank if they did that. It's just about hiring the right team of writers and keeping the noses of the executive board people who think they know everything out of the scripts and let the creatives do their thing and be creative. The key here is hire the right team. No more agenda crap. Just keep it about Star Wars and keep the story alive. That's it. I don't think that there's some sort of like excitement that, every 3 years people are going to be like, oh my God, a Star Wars movie. Yeah, sure. But you know what? We could have that every year as well. Case in point, Rogue One and The Last Jedi. They were a year apart and they both did phenomenally well. Rogue One because it was a good movie, The Last Jedi because it was the continuation of the next sequel film. And because the marketing for The Last Jedi was still to this day, I think, better than any other Star Wars project to date. There was so much hype around that film. It was unbelievable. I remember you could just like feel it in the air. And this, is partially due to Luke Skywalker having like the 2-second cameo he had in The Force Awakens, where we're expecting him to go all out and, really see Luke finally in Episode 8. And boy, did we see somebody else. So these are my thoughts on Kathleen Kennedy and the Star Wars release dates going forwards for movies, as well as her odd correlation between the Bond films and what they should be doing when George was doing it literally all along for Star Wars, which is what we're creating here. Anyhow, let me know what you guys think. I love you all. Happy May the 4th, and I'll catch you in the next video.